Why it is called as multiple way branching? Because multiple alternatives we have here. If it is true, then regarding statement will execute. If it is false, once again it will check for the next condition. The process will continue till the last one. If all the conditions not satisfy, finally here it will display the default value. Why here we are using break statement? Because if I use a break statement, then it will come out from the loop. There is a difference between break as well as exit function. Welcome back to One and All. Myself, Vasanta, lecturer in Computer Science, Vidhyaashram, Pre-University College, Temple of Excellence, Mysore. Today, we are going to start with the second session of control statements. Whereas in the previous session, you have studied regarding what do you mean by control statement, then what are the different types of control statement, under that selection statement, if statement, if else statement. Whereas on today's class, you will come to know regarding if else if statement, nested if statement as well as switch statement. Whereas in the previous session you studied only regarding if statement as well as if else statement, but today if else if statement as well as nested if as well as switch statement. First we will discuss one by one. First we will discuss regarding if else if statement. What do you mean by if else if statement? When you come on particular conditions, under that if first condition is not satisfied, then it will check for the second condition. If the second condition also not satisfied, then it will check for the third condition. If third one also not satisfied, then it will check for the fourth condition. Like that it will continue till the last one. If all the condition not satisfied, then finally it will display the default value. In if we have only one condition, under that condition if it is true, then statement will execute. Finally, it will come out from that concept, that is if a statement. Whereas on if else statement, if it is false, then also some particular statement there it will go to execute. That means only one condition is there. But when they come on if else if, multiple conditions are there. Multiple conditions are there. Depending upon that condition, the statement will execute. That's why it is called as multiple way branching. Whereas if a statement is called as one way branching, if else statement is called as two way branching, whereas if else if can be called as multiple way branching. Whereas this structure helps the programmer to decide the execution of a statement from the multiple statement based on the condition. It is the ability of the programming language to execute the statement depending upon the condition. There will be more than one condition to be tested here. Whereas in if as well as in if else, only one condition is there. Depending upon that condition, we are going to displaying the alternative value. Whereas here multiple conditions are there. This statement is also known as multiple way branching. Why it is called as multiple way branching? Because multiple alternatives we have here. If it is true, then regarding statement will execute. If it is false, once again it will check for the next condition. If all the conditions are false, then finally it will display the default value. When we come on if else statement, there we have the general syntax. First, if test condition, if the condition satisfy, then statement 1 will execute. Else, then it will check for the second condition. If second condition is also satisfied, then it will display the statement 2. Otherwise, else it will check for the next condition. Like that the process will continue. Else, if test condition is n, if it is satisfied, then statement n will go to execute. Otherwise, finally the default statement here it will go to execute. It means that if corresponding condition satisfies, corresponding statement will execute. Otherwise, it check for the next condition. If all the conditions are not satisfied, finally it will display the default value. That's why it is called as multiple way branching. When we come on example, for example, if marks is greater than or equals to 85, then it will display that is C out distinction it will display. If the marks is not satisfied, if this condition not satisfied, it will come to the else part. There it check for the next condition. If marks is greater than or equals to 60, then it will display the first class it is. If the marks is not greater than or equals to 60, then it will check for the next condition. That is, if marks is greater than or equals to 50, then it will display that it is a second class. Else, it will check for the next condition, that is, if marks is greater than or equals to 35, then it will display that pass statement, just pass. Otherwise, else the default statement, it will display it as fail. That means here multiple conditions are there. Depending upon the condition, the corresponding statement it is going to execute. For example, here first condition. What is the condition? If marks is greater than or equals to 85. If it is true, then it will display that distinction. If it is false, then it will check for the next condition. If marks is greater than or equals to 60. Then it will display, if it is true, then it will display it as first class. If it is not satisfied, fail, then it will check for the next condition. If marks is greater than or equals to 50. If it is true, then it will display the second class. Else, if it is false, then it will check for the next condition. That is, if marks is greater than or equals to 35. Then if it is true, then it will display just pass. Otherwise, the default statement here it will display it as fail. Finally, everything will come out from the loop here. That means here multiple conditions are there. Now, if you observe this flow chart, here you will come to know that if condition 1 satisfy, then statement 1 will execute. If the condition not satisfy, if it is false, then it will check for the second condition. If this condition is true, statement 2 will execute. Like that, the process will continue here. It means that how many conditions we have, all the conditions, it will check. Then last condition also it will check. If condition, if it is equals to n, if it is satisfy n, then it will display the statement n. Otherwise, finally it will display the default statement here. Here, if you observe this flow chart, then you come to know that multiple conditions are there. Here, condition 1 is tested first. First one it will test. If it is true, then the statement 1 will be executed. Here the statement 1, here it will going to execute. And the control will transfer out of the statement structure. Otherwise, it will check for the condition 2, it is tested. If this condition not satisfied, then it will check for the second condition. Like this, the process will continue till the last one. If all the condition not satisfy, finally here it will display the default value. If none of the condition is satisfied, if any of the condition is not satisfied, then the statement called default statement will be executed here. This is regarding if, else, if statement. Now we will explain the next one, that is nested if statement. Whereas in the previous case, here you have studied regarding if, else, if. There multiple conditions are there, more than 2, 3, 4 conditions are there. But when we come on nested if statement, whereas the name itself says that nested, it means that inside one if condition, if you have one more if condition, then it can be called as nested if. If we have inside one for loop, if you have one more for loop, then we can call it as nested for loop. But now you are studying nested if statement. It means that inside one if condition, if you have one more if condition, then it can be called as nested if statement. Here for example, consider we have the condition 1. If this condition is true, then once again it will check for the second condition, if condition 2. If it is false, then once again it will check for the next condition, condition 3. Here if it is true, then statement 1 will execute. If it is false, then statement 2 will execute. Here also if it is true, then statement 3 will execute. If it is false, then statement 4 will execute. Finally, everything will come out here. It means that if the statement of if a statement is another if a statement, then such an if statement is called as nested if a statement. Inside one if statement, if you have one more if it is true or if it is false, then we used to call it as nested if statement. Nested if statement contains an if statement within another if statement. Inside one if statement, we have one more if statement, in nested if statement. If you observe this flow chart here, if first condition, if it is true, then it will check for the second condition. If the second condition also true, then statement 1 will execute. If the first condition is true and the second condition if it is false, then statement 2 will execute. In the same way, if first condition is false, then it will check for the condition 3. If the first condition is false and the third condition if it is true, then statement 3 will execute. In the same way, if first condition if it is false and condition 3 if it is false, both are false, then statement 4 here we are going to execute. It means that inside one if we have one more if for both true as well as for false. If you observe here, when exactly the statement 2 will execute, here first condition has to be true, second condition has to be false, then statement 2 will execute. When exactly the statement 4 will execute, when first condition is false, here if you observe here false and third condition is also false, then statement 4 will execute. When exactly the statement 1 will execute, here first condition is also true and the second condition is also true, then statement 1 will execute. Like this, inside one if statement, if you have one more if statement, then we used to call it as nested if statement. When we come on nested if statement, the general syntax is if test condition. Inside first condition, we have one more condition if test condition 2. If both the conditions are satisfied, here if both the condition 1 as well as condition 2, both if it is satisfied, then statement 1 will execute. Then after this, statement 1 will execute. Else, if you observe here, if this condition not satisfied, condition 2 if it is not satisfied, that is else part, then statement 2 will execute. That's why else statement 2 will execute. Else, here if you observe here, the else part, if the first condition not satisfied, then it will come for the else part. Here what happens? Once again it will check for the condition 3. If it is true, then statement 3 will execute. Otherwise, statement 4 will go to executing here. This is regarding nested if statement. When you come on the next one under selection statement, that is switch statement. The switch statement is also called as multiple selection construct, whereas if else if can be called it as multiple way branching, whereas here this can be called as multiple selection construct we used to say. But here if you observe here, in this switch statement only one condition is there, depending upon the label. Depending upon the label, that corresponding statement will go to execute. If you observe in if else if, there what happens? Multiple conditions are there, whereas in switch statement only one condition is there. In C++ has a built-in multiple branch selection statement, that is switch statement. If there are more than 2 alternatives to be selected, multiple selection construct is used here. Multiple selection construct is used when you have multiple choice but only one condition. The general form of switch statement is, first we have switch expression. Switch expression. For example, I want to find which day it is. For example, if I am going to give 1, then it has to display it as Sunday, 2 Monday, 3 Tuesday, like that one by one I want to display. For example, 1 I am going to take Sunday, 2 Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, then Saturday. Then if I am going to give 8, then what it has to display? Invalid date. On that time we can use this switch statement. What happens here? Only one condition depending upon this label. Depending upon the label, that corresponding statement here it will going to execute. The general syntax is first switch expression. There inside the brackets we have to write all the case labels. There case label if it is equals to 1, then statement 1 will execute, then it will break. Why here we are using break statement? Because if I use a break statement, then it will come out from the loop. There is a difference between break as well as exit function. Whereas break function helps to come out from the loop, whereas exit function helps to come out from the program itself. Here what happens? If I am going to give the label, if it is the value, if it is equals to 1, then statement 1 will execute, then it will come out from the loop. It just come out from the loop. For example, if case label, if it is equals to 2, for example, I am going to give 2, then statement, next statement 2 will execute, then break. Like that, 1, 2, 3, if you want you can write statement 1, 2, whichever you want you can write here. Whichever statement you want that you can write, then break. Like that, the process will continue till the last case label. Then if satisfies the last one, then statement n will execute, then break here. If all the condition not satisfy, for example, more than 7, 8, 9 if I am going to give, then what it has to display? It is an invalid day. In the same way, finally, if all the condition not satisfy, if all the labels are not satisfy, then default statement it has to execute. Then default statement it has to execute. It means that we have multiple selection options depending upon the label here. If you observe this flow chart, here what happens? We have only one condition. On that condition, if label if it is equals to 1, if label value is 1, then statement 1 will execute. If label if it is equals to 2, then statement 2 will execute. Like this, it will continue. Here we are in dotted format. It means that all the condition one by one, all the statement here it will execute depending upon the label. Then if it is label if it is equals to n, then statement n will execute. Finally, if all the labels are not satisfied, finally the default statement here it will going to execute. The default statement will execute here. This is regarding switch statement. Now we will explain this switch statement with one example program to find the name of the day given the day number, for example. Here I am going to give the day number. If case, here if you observe here, if case value if it is equals to 1, then it will display it as Sunday. See out, Sunday it will display, then break. No, it will display all the days, only Sunday it has to display, then it has to come out from the loop itself. For the sake, we are using break concept here. Next, if case if it is equals to 2, then it will display it as Monday, then break. In the same way, if case if it is equals to 3, then it will display Tuesday, then break. Then if case if it is equals to 4, then it will display Wednesday, then break here. It means that we are coming from the program, especially here we are coming from the loop itself. That's sake we are using break concept. When you want to come out from the program itself, there we are using exit concept. Now up to the case label we are given 4. Whereas if you observe, if I am going to give case if it is equals to 5, then it will display Thursday, then break. If it is 6, Friday, break. If it is 7, Saturday, break. If it is more than 7, it may be 8, 9, 10 like that, then it will display invalid day number, then finally we will close this bracket. It means that here we are open switch bracket, that we are closing here. It means that for a switch statement, multiple statements are there, but only one condition is there. That's why it is called as multiple selection construct. These are the major concepts you have studied. Whereas in the next class, you will come to know regarding the iterative statements, like what do you mean by for loop, how to display for loop, then what do you mean by while loop, how to write the while loop, as well as do while loop. When they come on, if a statement, it is called as one-way branching, if else is called as two-way branching, if else if can be called as multiple way branching. When they come on switch statement, it also be called as multiple selection construct. But in the next class, you will study regarding iterative statements. Under that iterative statements, we have while loop, do while loop, as well as for loop. But when they come on while loop, it is called as pre-tested looping, do while can be called as post-tested looping, as well as for loop can be called as fixed execution. But there when they come on while as well as do while, the main difference between while loop and do while loop is, when they come on while loop, if the condition is wrong in the beginning itself, then not even single time the statement will execute. If condition is wrong in the beginning itself, whereas in do while at least one time the statement will execute. It means that in the next class you will study briefly regarding while loop, do while loop, as well as for loop. Now is it clear for all of you? Next class will meet you once again. Thank you.